They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, tonight, that's a damn lie. Because what happened at Money in the Bank 2025, between Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, is about to explode right here, backstage. I'm talking about a betrayal so brutal, it sent shockwaves not just through the WWE Universe, but through the very foundation of the Bloodline itself. And now, the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, fresh off his own main event, is on a collision course. Forget championship gold, forget bragging rights, this is about family, about loyalty, and about a debt that's about to be paid in blood. Roman Reigns. Jacob Fatu. Backstage. You don't want to miss a single second of this. What unfolded moments ago was more than just a wrestling maneuver, it was a betrayal so brutal, so unexpected, that it sent shockwaves not just through the millions watching in the WWE Universe, but through the very foundation of the Bloodline itself. Solo Sikoa, the stoic enforcer, the iron fist of the tribal chief, lay crumpled after a vicious, unprovoked assault, not by an enemy, but by someone bearing the same sacred family name. The images are seared into the collective memory. The shock on the faces of the commentators, the stunned silence from the crowd, and then the inevitable roar of disbelief as the realization dawned. Jacob Fatu, the enigmatic force recently rumored to be lurking in the shadows, had made his presence known in the most devastating way possible, targeting his own kin. And now, the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, fresh off his own grueling main event performance, his victory, or defeat, momentarily overshadowed, is on a collision course. His face, usually a mask of controlled power, is now contorted with a primal rage, a fury born not of championship loss, but of family desecration. This isn't a prepared statement or a scheduled interview, this is raw, unfiltered emotion boiling over. We're about to delve into the immediate aftermath of this seismic event, peeling back the layers of a dynasty seemingly on the verge of imploding. This deep dive will explore the simmering tensions that have undoubtedly been brewing beneath the surface of the Bloodline's ironclad unity, revealing the hidden cracks that led to this catastrophic split. We will dissect the brutal specifics of Fatu's assault on Solo Sikoa, understanding the calculated viciousness of his actions and the profound impact it has had. Most importantly, we will witness, through the eyes of those present, the imminent confrontation between Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu, a meeting that promises to reshape not only the Bloodline but potentially the entire landscape of WWE for years to come. Forget championship gold, forget bragging rights, this is about family, about loyalty, and about a debt that's about to be paid in blood. Roman Reigns. Jacob Fatu. Backstage. You don't want to miss a single second of this unfolding drama. The monolithic dominance of the Bloodline, once thought to be impenetrable, has been a cornerstone of WWE for years. Under the iron-fisted rule of Roman Reigns, this dynasty of Samoan wrestling royalty forged an empire built on loyalty, intimidation, and an almost religious adherence to the tribal chief's word. Yet, beneath the veneer of absolute unity, the seeds of discord were quietly, almost imperceptibly, being sown. This wasn't a sudden fracture, but rather a slow, creeping erosion, born from the very power dynamics that defined their reign. The initial cracks, often dismissed as minor family squabbles, began to appear subtly. Think back to early 2024. While Jey Uso's dramatic departure had already shaken the foundation, it was often framed as a necessary purging, a sacrifice for the greater good of the Bloodline. But the true test of internal cohesion came when Jimmy Uso, despite his unwavering devotion, sometimes questioned the tribal chief's methods, albeit meekly. These moments, fleeting as they were, hinted at a deeper, more personal struggle within the ranks. Was Roman's absolute authority beginning to chafe, even among those who benefited most from it? The answer, in retrospect, was a resounding, if unspoken, yes. Solo Sikoa, the youngest and arguably most fiercely loyal enforcer, was a crucial piece of Roman's puzzle. His silent, often brutal, obedience was a stark contrast to the more expressive Jimmy. Solo was the unthinking weapon, a blunt instrument of the tribal chief's will. Yet, even Solo's unwavering devotion carried a subtle undercurrent of unease for some. Was he truly acting out of loyalty, or merely out of an ingrained, almost robotic, obedience? The narrative often emphasized Solo's commitment, but savvy observers noted the way he seemed to operate in a vacuum, his interactions often limited to direct orders from Roman, rather than genuine camaraderie with his cousins. This emotional distance, while strategically beneficial for Roman in projecting power, created a void that could, eventually, be filled by other influences or motivations. The concept of the bloodline evolved from a family unit into an almost corporate entity, with Roman as its CEO. Decisions were unilateral, and dissent, even in its mildest form, was met with swift, often brutal, consequences. This created a climate of fear, where silence was mistaken for agreement. While it solidified Roman's position, it simultaneously fostered resentment and a feeling of being subservient rather than truly collaborative. This was particularly true for those members of the broader Anoa'i family who weren't directly part of the main WWE narrative, but who observed from the periphery, perhaps nursing their own ambitions or grievances. Consider the family gatherings, often portrayed in promotional material or in candid social media posts. While ostensibly celebrations of unity, there were always subtle cues. Who stood closest to Roman? Whose voice held the most weight? The hierarchy was rigid, and for individuals with their own pride and aspirations, such a rigid structure could feel stifling. Jacob Fatu, even before his direct involvement, represents this broader, perhaps overlooked, segment of the family. His reputation, his lineage, his own accomplishments outside of WWE, would undoubtedly have given him a sense of self-worth that might have bristled at the idea of bowing completely to Roman's singular authority, especially if he felt he wasn't receiving due recognition or a fair share of the bloodline's formidable power. The unspoken questions lingered: was the bloodline truly about family, or had it become solely about Roman Reigns' supremacy? Did the other members, even Jimmy and Solo, harbor hidden frustrations about their roles as mere extensions of the tribal chief's will? While the storyline consistently showcased their loyalty, the human element of ambition, jealousy, and the desire for individual recognition is undeniable. Every great dynasty eventually faces internal strife, and the bloodline, despite its seemingly unbreakable facade, was not immune. These were the fertile grounds upon which the seeds of discord were planted, watered by unaddressed grievances, and allowed to grow in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to burst forth into destructive bloom. Think about the dynamics within any large family, especially one with a powerful patriarch. Have you ever felt the pressure of family expectations, especially when loyalty is tested to its breaking point? In a public forum like WWE, where every action is magnified and every emotion scrutinized, these pressures are amplified 1,000-fold. The demand for unwavering allegiance, the constant need to prove oneself worthy of the tribal chief's approval, could eventually wear down even the most devoted members. This continuous pressure, often subtle but relentless, created a ticking time bomb within the bloodline. The question was not if it would explode, but when, and who would be the catalyst for the inevitable detonation. The answer, brutally revealed at Money in the Bank 2025, was Jacob Fatu. For years, the WWE Universe watched the bloodline operate with a chilling efficiency, a seemingly impenetrable unit bound by blood and the will of Roman Reigns. But for those deeply entrenched in the wider world of professional wrestling, a different name echoed in the halls of independent circuits and rival promotions: Jacob Fatu. He was a specter, a name whispered with a mixture of fear and awe, a force of nature whose lineage alone commanded respect, but whose in-ring brutality solidified his legend. Now, that shadow has stepped into the blinding lights of WWE, not as an ally, but as a devastatingly potent new threat. Who is Jacob Fatu? He is not merely another member of the sprawling Anoa'i family. He is the son of Sam Fatu, the Tonga Kid, and the nephew of Umaga and Rikishi, a cousin to Roman Reigns, the Usos, and Solo Sikoa. This is a bloodline steeped in wrestling royalty, but Jacob forged his own path, distinct from the polished, corporate sheen of WWE. For years, he carved out a reputation as a dominant, uncompromising force, most notably as a cornerstone of Major League Wrestling, MLW, where he held their World Heavyweight Championship for an astonishing 819 days. During this reign, he wasn't just a champion, he was an unstoppable monster, a whirlwind of power moves, high-flying assaults, and an unpredictable, primal aggression that set him apart. His matches were less about technical prowess and more about raw, unadulterated destruction. Opponents didn't just lose, they were annihilated. This history is crucial to understanding the seismic impact of his arrival and, more specifically, his targeting of Solo Sikoa. Fatu wasn't just a random attacker, he was a legitimate, established threat from outside the traditional WWE ecosystem, carrying a formidable reputation. He represents a different brand of violence, one that is less about intricate storytelling and more about visceral, impactful brutality. His presence alone injects a new level of unpredictability into the Bloodline's already complex dynamic. But why now? Why did Jacob Fatu choose Money in the Bank 2025, and why Solo Sikoa? The motivations are murky, steeped in a blend of speculation and the deeper, unspoken resentments that often plague dynastic families. One prevailing theory is a power grab. The Bloodline, under Roman, had become too centralized, too focused on a single tribal chief. Perhaps Fatu, with his own history of dominance, saw an opportunity to carve out his own territory, to challenge the existing order. His attack on Solo wasn't random, it was a calculated strike at the very enforcer, the muscle, of Roman reigns. By incapacitating Solo, Fatu wasn't just sending a message, he was dismantling a crucial pillar of Roman's power structure. It was a direct challenge to Roman's authority, delivered with maximum prejudice. Another layer of motivation could be a desire for recognition, a deep-seated resentment at being overlooked or undervalued by the mainstream WWE machine. While Roman, the Usos, and Solo became global superstars under the WWE banner, Fatu was toiling elsewhere, building his own formidable legacy. Was there a quiet bitterness that his lineage, his own undeniable talent, wasn't immediately recognized within the Bloodline's WWE hierarchy? Was he seen as less than, simply because he hadn't walked the same path? This attack could be his violent declaration of self-worth, a brutal demand for a seat at the table, or perhaps, a desire to dismantle the table entirely and build his own. The whispers of his impending arrival had been circulating for months, a low hum beneath the roar of the WWE crowd. Rumors of his unique style, his family ties, and his fearsome reputation had wrestling journalists buzzing. Yet, despite the anticipation, no one truly predicted the sheer ferocity, nor the specific target, of his debut. It's like a storm brewing on the horizon, the weathermen warn you, the clouds gather, but you never truly understand the full, destructive force until it unleashes its full fury directly upon you. That storm, in the form of Jacob Fatu, has now broken over the Bloodline. His unique blend of size, agility, and a terrifying unpredictability makes him a uniquely dangerous opponent for anyone, even Roman Reigns. He's not just a powerhouse, he can move with the speed of a cruiserweight, leap from the top rope, and contort himself in ways that defy his stature. This dynamic, unpredictable offense, coupled with a genuine aura of menace, sets him apart from other big men in WWE. It's a style that could dismantle the calculated, methodical approach often favored by Roman Reigns. Furthermore, Fatu's character has always been shrouded in a grim intensity. He rarely speaks, preferring to let his actions do the talking. This silence amplifies his menace, creating an almost mythical quality around him. What thoughts drive him? What past grievances fuel his rage? This enigmatic quality only adds to his allure as a new threat. He's not just an opponent. He's a psychological puzzle, a primal force that Roman Reigns has never truly encountered within the confines of his carefully controlled Bloodline empire. This is more than just a debut, it's a statement. Jacob Fatu isn't looking for a spot, he's looking to reshape the entire family tree, and his brutal assault on Solo Sikoa was merely the first, devastating tremor of a much larger earthquake. The question now isn't just about his motivation, but about the extent of the damage he intends to inflict, and whether the Bloodline, and more specifically Roman Reigns, can withstand the onslaught of a family member whose brutality knows no bounds. The energy inside the T-Mobile Arena was electric. Money in the Bank 2025 was in full swing, delivering the high-octane spectacle fans had come to expect. The air buzzed with anticipation for the main event ladder matches, but before the night's ultimate prize could be claimed, an undercard bout featuring Solo Sikoa was poised to deliver its own brand of hard-hitting action. Solo, the enforcer of the Bloodline, was scheduled to face a formidable opponent, a veteran known for his resilience and uncanny ability to absorb punishment, a man who, on any other night, would have been the focal point of a compelling story. However, tonight, he was merely a precursor, an unwitting participant in a brutal act of betrayal that would rewrite the narrative of an entire dynasty. Solo Sikoa entered the arena with his customary solemnity, his face a stoic mask, his movements deliberate and powerful. The crowd, a mix of fervent supporters and vocal detractors of the Bloodline, reacted with a potent blend of cheers and boos. He moved like a man on a mission, his loyalty to Roman Reigns etched into every fiber of his being. The match itself, for the initial 10 minutes, was a bruising affair. Solo utilized his signature ground and pound style, punctuated by powerful Samoan drops and relentless strikes. His opponent, a formidable challenge in his own right, managed to mount a valiant offense, showcasing his tenacity and pushing Solo to his limits. The ebb and flow of the contest kept the audience engaged, a solid, brutal encounter living up to the standards of a premium live event. There were near falls that drew gasps from the crowd. Solo kicked out of a devastating superplex from the top rope, his eyes still holding that unwavering intensity. His opponent, equally resilient, withstood a potent spinning solo, barely getting a shoulder up at the count of 2. The intensity escalated with each passing minute. Both competitors traded heavy blows in the center of the ring, the sound of flesh on flesh echoing through the arena. Solo began to gain the upper hand, his power proving too much for his tiring adversary. He set up for the Samoan spike, the deadly thumb strike that had felled so many opponents, and the crowd collectively braced for the decisive blow. It was in this precise moment, as Solo pulled back his arm, preparing to unleash his finisher, that the atmosphere in the arena shifted. Not subtly, but jarringly. A sudden flicker on the Titantron, a brief, distorted image, caused a ripple of confusion. Then, from the very top of the ramp, a figure emerged, shrouded in a dark, almost menacing silhouette. He moved with a predatory grace, his pace measured, yet undeniably purposeful. The commentators, initially caught off guard, stammered, "Who is that?" The camera struggled to get a clear shot, but the outline, the powerful build, and a certain unmistakable swagger began to register. It was Jacob Fatu. The crowd's murmurs turned into a roar of shock and recognition. The commentators, usually so composed, erupted. "My God! Is that Jacob Fatu? What is he doing here?" Solo Sikoa, distracted by the sudden appearance, paused his attack, his head turning towards the ramp, a rare moment of vulnerability showing on his usually impassive face. This momentary lapse was all Fatu needed. Moving with astonishing speed for a man his size, Jacob Fatu didn't approach the ring conventionally. Instead, he lunged over the barricade, bypassing the steps, a primal display of aggression. He vaulted into the ring, not towards the referee, not towards Solo's opponent, but directly, inexorably, towards Solo Sikoa. The air crackled with a dreadful certainty. This wasn't a run into aid, it was an ambush. The brutal nature of his assault unfolded with terrifying efficiency. Solo Sikoa, still disoriented by Fatu's unexpected appearance, barely had time to turn before Jacob unleashed a flurry of devastating blows. The first was a savage superkick, delivered with such force that Solo's head snapped back. He stumbled, dazed, but before he could regain his footing, Fatu followed up with a powerful Samoan drop, driving Solo hard into the mat. The impact reverberated through the arena, a sickening thud that silenced the crowd for a split second. But Fatu wasn't finished. He didn't go for a pin, nor did he simply walk away. This was a calculated, vicious destruction. He dragged Solo to the corner, hoisting him up with unnerving ease onto the top turnbuckle. The crowd knew what was coming. This wasn't wrestling, this was a personal vendetta. Fatu then ascended the ropes, executing a mind-numbing springboard moonsault that crashed down onto Solo's prone form, leaving him gasping for air. The sheer athleticism and brutality of the move from a man of Fatu's size was jaw-dropping. The referee, initially stunned, finally began to wave for help, but it was too late. Fatu wasn't done. He pulled Solo to the center of the ring again, the tribal chief's enforcer now a crumpled, defenseless heap. With a chilling, almost triumphant snarl, Jacob Fatu lifted Solo high into the air, spinning him into a devastating pop-up Samoan drop, driving him into the canvas with sickening force. The impact left Solo motionless, his body unresponsive. Fatu then punctuated the assault with a final, contemptuous diving headbutt, a move reminiscent of his legendary uncle, Umaga, but delivered with a cold, precise malice that transcended homage. He then stared down at Solo's inert form, a silent, chilling message conveyed through his eyes: "I am here. And I will destroy everything you built." The crowd's reaction was a visceral mix of shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of dread. There were gasps, screams, and then an almost eerie silence as the gravity of the betrayal sunk in. The initial confusion had dissipated, replaced by a collective understanding: this was a family member, decimating another, not for a championship, but for reasons far more personal and insidious. On commentary, Michael Cole's voice cracked with disbelief: "My God. This is an absolute atrocity. Jacob Fatu has just absolutely brutalized his own cousin." Corey Graves, usually quick with a sarcastic quip, was uncharacteristically subdued, his tone reflecting genuine shock. "I've never seen anything like it. This is a complete breakdown of the bloodline. What possesses a man to do this to his own family?" Online, social media exploded. Hashtags like #Bloodline Betrayal, #Fatu Debut, and #MITB 2025 were trending within seconds. Fans expressed a mix of outrage, morbid fascination, and frantic speculation. Did anyone see this coming? The bloodline is officially dead. Roman's going to kill him. The immediate fan reaction, both in the arena and across the digital landscape, was overwhelmingly one of stunned disbelief. The sheer unexpectedness of the attack, coupled with its raw brutality and the devastating blow to Solo Sikoa, ensured it would be the talking point of the night, overshadowing every other match. The medics and WWE officials rushed to the ring, pushing Fatu away as he stood over Solo's lifeless form. He didn't resist, simply surveying the damage with a chilling satisfaction before turning and slowly making his way back up the ramp, his eyes fixed on some distant point, as if already planning his next act of destruction. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the boos or the shouts. He simply walked, leaving behind the wreckage of Solo Sikoa and the shattered fragments of the bloodline's perceived unity. It was a moment that redefined the entire event. Money in the Bank 2025, which had promised high stakes and exciting finishes, had delivered something far more profound: a family war, fought with savage intent, right in the middle of a wrestling ring. And the most surprising fact of all? Despite the circulating rumors of Fatu's potential arrival, sources close to WWE had indicated that Fatu's debut was actually planned for a later date, potentially weeks after Money in the Bank, to maximize its impact. His spontaneous, unannounced appearance and immediate, brutal attack on Solo Sikoa were reportedly a last-minute decision, a strategic pivot to capitalize on the existing bloodline tension and deliver a truly unforgettable, unscripted-feeling moment of chaos. This last-minute change only magnified the shock, ensuring the attack was not just brutal, but also entirely unexpected, elevating it from a planned segment to an almost organic, terrifying eruption of violence. The carefully constructed narrative of the bloodline had been ripped apart, and the blood of Solo Sikoa stained the canvas, a grim testament to the new, terrifying reality. The brutal assault on Solo Sikoa by Jacob Fatu was not merely an in-ring spectacle, it was a devastating act that immediately transformed into a desperate medical emergency. As Jacob Fatu deliberately and slowly ascended the ramp, leaving a chilling silence in his wake, the immediate reality of Solo Sikoa's condition became terrifyingly apparent. He lay motionless on the canvas, a crumpled heap of muscle and tattoos, his chest barely rising and falling, his eyes glazed over and unfocused. The raw savagery of the attack had left an indelible mark, physically and, undoubtedly, emotionally. The urgency of the situation was palpable. Before Fatu had even reached the top of the ramp, the ring was swarmed by a flurry of activity. WWE medical personnel, identifiable by their crisp white shirts and grim expressions, rushed in, their bags already unzipped. They were flanked by several WWE officials and a handful of security personnel, their faces etched with concern. The referee, still visibly shaken, pointed frantically towards Solo, relaying the severity of the blows he had absorbed. The immediate assessment was critical. Dr. Chris Amon, WWE's senior medical director, was among the first to reach Solo's side, quickly barking orders. They cautiously rolled Solo onto his back, carefully checking for spinal injuries, a paramount concern after such forceful impacts. His eyes were unresponsive to light, and a quick check revealed a deep, angry contusion blossoming on the side of his head where Fatu's initial superkick had landed. Another medic swiftly began administering oxygen, a mask gently placed over Solo's mouth and nose. The faint hiss of the oxygen tank filled the space, a stark contrast to the earlier roar of the crowd. Check for concussion protocols, a medic ordered, a small pen light flickering over Solo's dilated pupils. What's his responsiveness? Any neurological signs? The rapid-fire questions and the hushed, urgent replies underscored the seriousness of the situation. Solo remained largely unresponsive, a worrying sign given his usual resilience. The repeated impact of the springboard moonsault, the pop-up Samoan drop, and especially the diving headbutt had taken a grievous toll. There was concern for potential internal injuries, particularly to his ribs and abdomen, considering the sheer force of Fatu's body crashing down on him. For a professional wrestler, such an attack, whether storyline or legitimate, carries significant implications. Beyond the dramatic narrative, there is a very real human being whose career, and indeed health, could be jeopardized. The line between kayfabe and reality often blurs in such violent moments, and the sheer force Jacob Fatu had demonstrated left little room for doubt that Solo Sikoa had taken legitimately brutal bumps. Was this part of the story, or had Fatu genuinely unleashed a level of force that crossed a dangerous line? The immediate consensus among medical staff suggested the latter, or at least a powerful performance that mimicked legitimate injury with terrifying accuracy. The long-term effects of concussions are well documented, and the medical team's primary focus was to stabilize Solo and prevent any further damage. The scene quickly transitioned from the brightly lit ring to the more chaotic, yet equally urgent, backstage treatment area. A stretcher was quickly brought out, and with careful, synchronized movements, Solo was gingerly lifted onto it. His body remained limp, save for the slight rise and fall of his chest under the oxygen mask. As he was wheeled away, the commentators provided hushed updates, their voices tinged with genuine concern. Solo Sikoa is being stretchered out of the arena. This is a very serious situation, folks. Our thoughts are with Solo right now. Backstage, the atmosphere was a mix of hushed whispers and frantic activity. Solo was immediately taken to the medical bay, a sterile, well-equipped room typically used for immediate first aid and diagnostics. The heavy double doors swung shut, signaling the private nature of the emergency. Inside, the team continued their assessment. They began removing Solo's ring attire, carefully, to allow for a more thorough examination of his body. Bruising was already evident on his back and ribs, testament to the violent impact. "We need to get an ambulance on standby," a voice was heard from inside the bay. "Possible spinal precaution, definite concussion protocol. Prepare for transport to a local medical facility for further imaging." This wasn't a superficial injury, this was a comprehensive medical response to a potentially severe traumatic incident. The decision to transport him to a hospital underscored the gravity of his condition. They would need X-rays, MRI scans, and possibly a CT scan to rule out fractures, internal bleeding, or severe neurological damage. The concern was palpable among the few personnel allowed near the bay. Road agents, producers, and even a few sympathetic fellow wrestlers lingered anxiously outside, their faces grim. for them, it wasn't just a storyline. It was a colleague, a friend, who had just been brutally attacked. They understood the risks of the business, but to see someone so utterly decimated, especially by a supposed family member, hit differently. The very act of Fatu attacking Solo, who represented the steadfast, unwavering loyalty within the bloodline, felt like a violation on multiple levels. The empathy for Solo in that moment was profound. Think about the trust Solo had placed in the system, in the unwritten rules of family, and how completely that trust was shattered in mere moments. Solo Sikoa had consistently presented himself as an unshakable force, someone immune to pain or doubt. To see him in such a vulnerable, helpless state was a stark reminder of his humanity, and the cruel nature of the betrayal. He had given his unwavering loyalty to Roman Reigns, acting as his shield and his sword. His dedication to the bloodline was absolute, unquestioning. And in return, he was subjected to a public, humiliating, and devastating assault by someone who shared his blood, someone who was supposed to be family. This wasn't a fair fight, nor was it a prearranged segment designed for entertainment alone. This was a calculated, vicious targeting. Jacob Fatu had not just defeated Solo Sikoa, he had destroyed him. The physical pain was evident, but the emotional wound, the betrayal of trust within a family structure that preached loyalty above all else, would undoubtedly leave deeper, more lasting scars. For Solo, who had always been the silent, unflinching enforcer, this public humiliation and incapacitation by a family member was a profound blow to his very identity. It was a shattering of the protective bubble he had built around himself, a stark realization that even within his own bloodline, there was a level of malice he had never anticipated. The sounds of the distant crowd, still roaring from the ongoing event, seemed detached and unreal from the hushed intensity of the medical bay. Inside, Solo was being carefully prepped for transport, his face pale, his breathing still shallow. The emergency medical technicians from the waiting ambulance arrived, wheeling in their own specialized gurney. The process was slow, meticulous, and focused on minimizing any movement that could exacerbate potential injuries. As the doors of the ambulance eventually closed, the flashing lights painting the backstage area in an eerie blue and red, the silent question hung heavy in the air: how long until Solo Sikoa could return? And when he did, how would this profound betrayal, this brutal shattering of trust, have changed him? The aftermath of Money in the Bank 2025 was not just a medical emergency, it was the birth of a deep, personal vendetta. The tribal chief, Roman Reigns, was in the throes of his own crucible as the brutal betrayal unfolded. He had just emerged from a grueling, high-stakes encounter, likely a championship defense or a pivotal match that bore the weight of his legacy. The specific outcome of his match at Money in the Bank 2025, whether a hard-fought victory that reinforced his dominance or a shocking defeat that hinted at vulnerability, would have profoundly shaped his immediate emotional state. However, the news that swiftly followed would eclipse any personal triumph or setback, thrusting him into a far more primal, existential crisis. Imagine Roman, sweat-drenched and physically battered, making his way through the backstage labyrinth after his match. Perhaps he was savoring a hard-won victory, the roar of the crowd still echoing in his ears, or perhaps he was quietly seething from a narrow loss, already strategizing his next move. His mind would have been consumed by the intricacies of his own performance, the tactical nuances of his opponent, and the relentless pressure of maintaining his position at the apex of WWE. The tribal chief's world, meticulously constructed and rigidly controlled, was about to be irrevocably shattered. The moment of discovery would have been a gut punch, shattering the professional veneer Roman so carefully maintained. It wouldn't have been a simple casual remark. More likely, it would have been a frantic phone call from Paul Heyman, his voice uncharacteristically strained, or a worried locker room attendant rushing to him, breathlessly relaying the horrifying news. Perhaps he saw the immediate aftermath on a backstage monitor, the image of Solo Sikoa, his loyal enforcer, crumpled and motionless in the ring, Jacob Fatu's menacing silhouette retreating up the ramp. The sight alone would have ignited a slow burn of fury. Solo's been attacked, tribal chief. It was Jacob Fatu. These words, delivered with a mix of disbelief and urgency, would have resonated deep within Roman. The name alone, Fatu, immediately connected to his own bloodline, would have brought a layer of confusion, then a chilling realization. This wasn't an outside challenger, not a disgruntled rival seeking gold. This was family. This was betrayal from within. The weight of leadership immediately descended upon Roman, heavier than any championship belt he had ever worn. As the tribal chief, his primary responsibility was not merely to win matches or accumulate titles. It was to protect his family, to lead them, and to ensure their strength and unity. Solo Sikoa was more than just an enforcer, he was a manifestation of Roman's will, a symbol of the unwavering loyalty he commanded. To see Solo decimated, not by an enemy, but by another family member, was a direct challenge to Roman's authority and a profound insult to his leadership. This wasn't just a physical assault, it was an assault on the very tenets of the bloodline itself. Roman's internal conflict would have been immense. On one hand, the primal rage of a protective leader whose enforcer has been brutalized. On the other, the profound shock and confusion of a family patriarch confronted by an act of unthinkable betrayal from within his own lineage. How could a member of his family, someone who shared the sacred Inoi blood, commit such a heinous act against his most loyal soldier? Was this a calculated move to destabilize his reign? Was it a deep-seated, simmering resentment finally boiling over? Or was it something else, something far more sinister and personal? This moment would have forced Roman to confront the true nature of his power. Had his absolute authority, his almost tyrannical control over the bloodline, inadvertently sown the seeds of this rebellion? Had his focus on personal glory and universal acknowledgement blinded him to the growing discontent within his own ranks? These are the brutal questions that would have gnawed at him, even as his rage propelled him forward. The tribal chief is supposed to be infallible, unchallengeable. Yet, this act of defiance, so public and so violent, painted a starkly different picture. According to veteran wrestling analysts, this is the kind of personal affront that can truly redefine a character's trajectory, even for someone as established and dominant as Roman Reigns. For years, Roman has commanded respect through intimidation and power. But true leadership is tested not in times of triumph, but in moments of crisis and betrayal. This betrayal wasn't just physical, it was an ideological assault on everything Roman stood for as the tribal chief. It forces him to look inward, to question his own methods, and to potentially unleash a side of himself the WWE Universe has rarely seen. The news of Solo's condition would only fuel Roman's escalating fury. Details of Solo being stretchered out, the medical team's urgency, the speculation of concussions and internal injuries, each piece of information would chip away at Roman's composure, transforming his controlled rage into a terrifying, singular focus, retribution. The image of his stoic, unwavering enforcer lying helpless would replay in his mind, fueling a desire for vengeance that transcends any championship desire. Roman's face, usually a mask of calm dominance, would betray the profound turmoil within. His jaw would be clenched, eyes narrowed, searching for answers, but finding only a consuming anger. The weight of his bloodline, now seemingly splintered, would be a crushing burden. Every victory, every defense of his throne, now felt cheapened by this internal conflict. His authority, his very identity as the tribal chief, had been publicly challenged and disrespected. The unwritten rules of family, of loyalty, had been shattered. This confrontation with Jacob Fatu wouldn't be about winning a match, it would be about restoring honor, about asserting his dominance, and about delivering a brutal, undeniable message to anyone who dared to defy the tribal chief. It would be a raw, unfiltered clash, fueled by betrayal and the deep, complex bonds of family. Roman Reigns, the undisputed head of the table, now faced a challenge unlike any other, not from an outsider seeking his titles, but from a member of his own blood, seeking to tear his empire apart from within. The burden of the tribal chief had never been heavier, and the path to redemption would be paved with violence. The T-Mobile Arena, a sprawling nexus of concrete and steel, typically hums with the organized chaos of a major WWE event. But in the moments following Jacob Fatu's brutal assault on Solo Sikoa, that hum morphed into a palpable, almost suffocating tension. Roman Reigns, his mind a tempest of fury and disbelief, moved through this altered landscape with a singular, terrifying purpose: to find Jacob Fatu. This wasn't a search, it was a hunt. Imagine the typical backstage scene. Crew members bustling, producers shouting instructions, talent unwinding after their matches, the air thick with adrenaline and post-show decompression. Now, superimpose upon that the sudden, urgent whispers, the darting glances, the hushed voices relaying fragmented, horrifying news. Did you see what Fatu did to Solo? He's out cold, stretchered to the medical bay. This was the backdrop against which Roman's furious journey unfolded. Roman's face, usually a canvas of cool arrogance, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked sculpted from granite, his eyes narrowed into slits, darting from side to side, searching, dissecting every shadow. Every step he took was deliberate, heavy with the weight of vengeance. He wasn't walking, he was stalking. The usual entourage of security or even Paul Heyman might have been a few paces behind, struggling to keep up, their own faces reflecting a mixture of fear and dread. They knew this version of Roman Reigns, the tribal chief unleashed, was a force beyond reasoning. The frantic search began in the immediate vicinity of the gorilla position, the staging area where wrestlers make their entrance and exit. This zone, usually a hive of activity, was now marked by a sudden, anxious quietude as Roman's presence permeated the air. He didn't ask questions politely, he demanded answers. He brushed past startled production assistants, his powerful shoulders barely registering their presence. A low-level official, attempting to offer a standard post-match update, found himself silenced by a single, withering glare from Roman that promised severe repercussions for any interference. "Where is he?" Roman's voice, though low, carried an undeniable tremor of menace. His journey took him through the labyrinthine corridors of the arena, past rows of temporary locker rooms, equipment storage areas, and catering stations. Each turn brought a new sight, a new scent, but his focus remained razor-sharp, his senses attuned only to the possibility of Fatu. The whispers followed him, anticipating the inevitable collision. Other superstars, emerging from their own matches, caught glimpses of Roman's fury and instinctively cleared a path, recognizing the dangerous intensity radiating from him. No one dared to approach, to offer comfort, or even to ask. The silent understanding was clear: this was a family matter, raw and volatile, and any outsider interference would be met with swift and brutal consequences. One moment, Roman might have passed a television monitor playing a replay of Fatu's vicious attack on Solo. The sight, even for a fleeting second, would have caused his stride to falter, a fresh wave of blinding fury washing over him. The brutal precision of Fatu's moves, the sheer contempt in his actions, it was a deliberate act of desecration, a challenge to Roman's very sovereignty. He had protected the bloodline, shielded it from all external threats, only to have it torn apart from within, by one of his own blood. The betrayal was not just personal, it was existential. He might have encountered a few, genuinely worried officials or even a security guard attempting to de-escalate. "Roman, calm down, we have the situation under control," one might have ventured. Roman's response would have been chillingly direct, a low growl that carried more threat than any shout. "Under control? Solo Sikoa is in the medical bay because of your lack of control. Tell me where he is, now." The demand would be non-negotiable, leaving no room for argument or delay. The palpable tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every corner Roman turned, every door he approached, felt pregnant with the possibility of the impending confrontation. The pacing of this backstage hunt was a masterclass in building suspense. Mix quick, urgent descriptions of Roman's relentless movement and the frantic reactions of those around him, with moments of profound, simmering rage. A pause, a slow turn of his head as he hears a distant sound, a sudden acceleration of his pace as he locks onto a potential lead. The silence in some areas was punctuated by the distant roar of the crowd, a stark contrast to the boiling anger in Roman's gut. Think about the raw, relatable scenario. Imagine that moment when you're told someone you deeply care about has been hurt, savagely and without provocation, and the only thing you want is to find the person responsible. That primal instinct for vengeance, for justice, would be amplified tenfold in Roman Reigns, the tribal chief whose entire identity is built on protecting his family and dominating his environment. His anger wasn't just about Solo, it was about the desecration of his name, the disrespect to his rule, and the challenge to the very legacy he was meticulously building. He might have received fragmented reports from Paul Heyman, who, for all his cunning, would likely be genuinely rattled by the unprecedented nature of this betrayal. Tribal Chief, we're trying to locate Fatu. He was seen heading towards the loading dock. No, now they say he's near the production offices. The conflicting information would only sharpen Roman's focus, his determination hardening with each frustrated turn. The weight of the betrayal was a physical burden on Roman. He wasn't just searching for Fatu, he was searching for answers, for understanding. How could this happen? What fueled such venom within his own blood? These questions, though unvoiced, drove him forward, his powerful frame propelled by a singular, consuming need for confrontation. The backstage area, usually a place of controlled narratives, was now a volatile powder keg, and Roman Reigns was the match. The hunt was on, and the arena held its breath, knowing that when the tribal chief found his prey, the ensuing explosion would shatter more than just glass. The air backstage was not merely tense, it was electric, thick with a primal anticipation that transcended the usual buzz of a WWE event. Roman Reigns, his fury a tangible aura around him, rounded a final corner near the production offices, his eyes narrowed, his senses on high alert. And there he was. Jacob Fatu. He wasn't hiding. He was standing, almost nonchalantly, leaning against a stack of equipment cases, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. His heavy breathing, the glisten of sweat on his brow, spoke of the recent exertion, the brutal energy expended in his assault on Solo Sikoa. He looked like a predator who had just finished his meal, surveying his domain. The lighting in this particular corridor was harsh, fluorescent tubes casting long, stark shadows, making the moment feel starker, more real. There were no cameras here, no immediate audience beyond a few terrified production staff who melted into the shadows, clutching their clipboards. This was raw, unscripted. This was family. The two men locked eyes. The silence that fell between them was deafening, a vacuum sucking all sound from the bustling arena. It was a silence filled with history, with blood, with years of unspoken resentments and the fresh, searing wound of betrayal. Roman's powerful frame stiffened, every muscle taut, ready to spring. Fatu, for his part, slowly straightened, pushing off the cases, his own eyes burning with a dangerous challenge. He didn't flinch, didn't back down. There was an unsettling confidence about him, a chilling certainty that he had done what needed to be done. Roman was the first to break the silence, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated with suppressed rage. It wasn't the measured, authoritative tone of the tribal chief addressing his flock. It was the voice of a man pushed to his absolute limit, of a family patriarch whose trust had been utterly violated. Fatu, he hissed, his voice laced with venom. Why? Jacob Fatu's smirk widened, a flicker of something unsettling, amusement, contempt, or perhaps a twisted pride, in his eyes. He didn't immediately answer. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, then another, closing the distance between them, a clear challenge. Why, tribal chief? Fatu's voice, when it came, was a gravelly rasp, surprisingly calm, almost mocking. You ask why? You truly don't know? His gaze drifted momentarily, dismissively, towards the medical bay where Solo Sikoa was being tended to. He got what he deserved. The enforcer. The word enforcer was spat out, loaded with disdain. Roman's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white. The disdain in Fatu's voice for Solo, for the very role that Solo fulfilled in Roman's bloodline, was a direct insult. He's family. He's my family. What he did for us. For the bloodline. Roman's voice rose, a desperate attempt to find logic, to understand the unthinkable. Fatu let out a short, humorless chuckle. Family? Loyalty? Is that what you call it, Roman? Or is it just obedience? Blind, unquestioning obedience to your throne? He gestured broadly, encompassing the entire backstage area, perhaps even the distant roar of the crowd. You built this empire on the backs of our blood, Roman. You took the name, the legacy, and made it your own. And what about the rest of us? What about the ones who truly understand what it means to be a savage? The ones who don't just follow orders, but take what's theirs? This wasn't just a personal grievance, it was an ideological rift. Fatu wasn't just angry about being excluded. He was challenging Roman's entire philosophy of leadership, his very right to be tribal chief. He saw Roman's reign not as a collective triumph, but as a personal appropriation, leaving others, like himself, in the shadows. He believed he was entitled to more, perhaps even to leadership itself, believing his more brutal, untamed approach was the true essence of their Samoan heritage. You speak of taking what's yours by destroying your own blood? Roman's voice was low again, dangerously quiet. You attacked Solo. My shield. My brother in arms. A debt will be paid for this, Fatu. A debt in blood. Fatu shrugged, a gesture of almost casual defiance that infuriated Roman further. Solo was weak. He became soft, too focused on your acknowledgement. He lost his edge. And what about the rest of us, Roman? While you sat on your throne, basking in the spotlight, where were we? Did you invite us to the table? Did you offer us a piece of your empire? Or did you just expect us to watch, forever in your shadow? His words were cold, cutting, imbued with a festering bitterness that had clearly been brewing for years. This was the core of the issue, resentment. Resentment at being sidelined, resentment at Roman's seemingly effortless ascent, resentment at the perceived arrogance of the tribal chief who had claimed the entire family's heritage as his own. Fatu wasn't just a physical threat. He was articulating a deep-seated grievance that Roman, in his relentless pursuit of greatness, might have inadvertently fostered. He was giving voice to the frustrations of other members of the sprawling Anoa'i family who felt their contributions, their potential, were overlooked in favor of Roman's singular dominance. The air throbbed with the raw emotion. Roman's face was a study in profound betrayal and blinding rage. The realization that this wasn't just a random act of violence, but a calculated, deeply personal vendetta, fueled by perceived injustices, only intensified his fury. He took a menacing step forward, his eyes burning with a primal fire. You want to talk about taking what's yours? You just took the last shred of my patience. And you took Solo from me. He'll heal, Fatu sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Or he won't. Doesn't matter. He was a pawn. You just lost your strongest piece, Roman. And now, you're exposed. That was the breaking point. The taunt, the callous disregard for Solo's condition, the challenge to his perceived vulnerability, it unleashed the beast within Roman. With a guttural roar, he lunged. This wasn't a choreographed move, it was a pure, unadulterated burst of fury. He moved with a speed that belied his size, a whirlwind of muscle and rage. The collision was violent and immediate. Roman tackled Fatu with the force of a battering ram, slamming him back against the metal equipment cases with a deafening clang. Fatu, caught off guard by the sheer velocity of Roman's attack, grunted as the air was forced from his lungs. Roman didn't release him, he kept him pinned against the cases, his powerful hands gripping Fatu's shoulders, shaking him. You will regret this, Fatu. You hear me? You will regret this. Fatu, though surprised, was no stranger to a brawl. He twisted, attempting to use his formidable strength to break Roman's grip. He landed a desperate knee to Roman's midsection, forcing the tribal chief to momentarily loosen his hold. Fatu then retaliated with a wild, desperate punch that grazed Roman's jaw. The immediate response from Roman was a thunderous forearm smash that connected squarely with Fatu's temple, sending his head snapping back against the metal. A low groan escaped Fatu's lips. The sound of the impact, the sheer ferocity of the exchange, finally spurred the lurking security personnel into action. Recognizing the dangerous escalation, a wave of burly guards, initially hesitant to interfere in what was clearly a family dispute, surged forward. "Break it up! Break it up," they shouted, their voices urgent, their movements synchronized. It took at least 5, perhaps even 6, security personnel to pry the two behemoths apart. Roman, still seething, struggled against their hold, his eyes never leaving Fatu. Fatu, equally defiant, fought against the restraining arms, his own eyes burning with the promise of future retribution. Even as they were pulled away from each other, the verbal barbs continued to fly. "This is just the beginning, Roman," Fatu snarled, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. "You built this on sand. It's all coming down. You're dead, Fatu." Roman roared back, his voice raw with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're dead to me. And you're dead to this family." The emotional connection was overwhelming. The pain of betrayal, the anger, the sheer disbelief on Roman's face were palpable. This wasn't just a scripted segment for the cameras, it was the raw, guttural agony of a leader whose trust had been violated by his own blood. It was a shattering moment for the Bloodline, revealing a fault line so deep, it threatened to tear the entire structure apart. The confrontation ended without a clear victor in terms of physical damage, but in terms of psychological warfare, the first shot had been fired, and the message was clear: the Bloodline was at war, and the battle lines were drawn in blood.